Hey friends, you ready? I'm not doing this alone. These are all my buddies here. A couple of these guys here, and I have had since we got together. One of these guys is from the kids' music space, Bonesy. He's with me as always. We're talking about step 4, and if you're doing it, you shouldn't be doing it alone either. All right, man. So step 4. I think one of the first talking points I write down here is that if we go back, step 1 and 2, these are reflection, acceptance steps. These are steps where we're called to kind of look inward and consider some ideas and then come to a place of acceptance. Steps 3 through 12, I think Bill kind of writes about this stuff. This is willingness and practice. Steps 3 through 12, we have to bring a willingness. We have to bring a desire. Oh, look at that. Hey, man, even Zeke came to help me out. Don't do step 4 alone, guys. Yeah, so it's about willingness. It's about bringing a desire to affect change in your life, and that's where we land on step 4, right? If you've got through steps 1, you've got through step 2, step 3 is definitely solidified. I wouldn't say solidified, that's the wrong word. Step 3 is working away in your life, right? You're really starting to comprehend that faith that works is possible, and it's prevalent in your day-to-day life. Your sponsors, your friends, your sober buddies in AA, in your recovery program, your chosen program of recovery are going to guide you towards step 4. And step 4, we get to know ourselves, and that's it's not always a fun place to be. I think what I want to do here is start right at page 49 and 50. So I'm probably going to be reading some stuff to you, and I think it's important that I take this right from the pages of the book, man. Page 49, page 50. So let me start there. Step 4, page 49, 12 steps and 12 traditions. About 2/3 of the way down. I believe Bill writes, so when AA suggests a fearless and moral inventory, it must seem to every newcomer that more is being asked of him than he can do. Both his pride and his fear beat him back every time he tries to look within himself. Pride says, you need not pass this way. Fear says, you dare not look. But the testimony of AAs who have really tried a moral inventory is that pride and fear of this sort turn out to be boogeymen, nothing else. Once we have a complete willingness to take inventory and exert ourselves to do the job thoroughly, a wonderful light falls upon this foggy scene. As we persist, a brand new kind of confidence is born, and the sense of relief at finally facing ourselves is indescribable. These are the first fruits of step 4. I can absolutely attest to this idea. Getting to know myself, getting to know me, getting to know the truth of who I am and who I was, bring about a sense of strength, a sense of knowledge that I wasn't prepared for. And it took me some time to grow into that. At this point in my sobriety walk, though, it's quite indescribable to have the sense of self, the sense of power and strength and confidence that I carry with me each day. And it comes from a truth that I certainly wasn't aware that, well, I wasn't aware it was available to me. If you're reading this book, if you're reading the 12 and 12, and you're doing all the things that I talk about in these videos, you've got your copies of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You've got your notes. You're plugging away at this stuff. There's a lot of truth in these pages that sometimes is very difficult to face. One of the talking points I made here, the natural human fight or flight response seemingly gets perverted in us, in those of us in these meetings. And I think that becomes a very common thread once you sit around the tables and you get to know a few other people in recovery. You start to make some sober buddies. That basic human desire for sexual relationships, for material, and I'm reading from some notes I made here, sexual relationships, material and emotional security, companionship, and this is taken right from the 12 and 12, I paraphrased, your desire to harvest food, build shelters. All of these are normal and therefore God-given traits in all human beings. We all have these basic desires, and somewhere along the line these things get perverted and send us into oblivion in a lot of cases. And I don't want to become some wannabe psychoanalyst here. I'm just trying to share from my own experience. One of the things Bill writes was we become tyrannized. I preferred the idea of being traumatized. In my own case, I've spoken openly about the fact that Blake Morton raped and molested me from the time I was 7 until almost 13 years old. That perverted my sex drive beyond description, and not something I certainly want to get into in the video, but just as an example of my own truth, getting to discuss that was a horrific idea. And I had been through a number of therapists' offices. I'd been in a number of child care workers' chairs and psychiatrists, psychologists. I had been to too many of these people to count and got nowhere until I sat down, drunk to drunk, alcoholic to alcoholic, with the pages of an inventory. I'm just going to show you briefly what that looks like here. I think there's a wonderful example of it, very simplified, right in the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous, page 65 in my third edition of the Big Book. Right there. That's just a real brief idea of how we can just kind of plug away at it. That's how I started, exactly like that. I've personally redone, if you will, my inventory, I think 3 different times, and there's so much stuff on the internet about how to do this and what people's suggestions are, but I'm a firm believer that sitting down with your closest sober buddies, some of those people that make you feel the most secure, you hear things like stick with the winners. And if you're at the place where you're ready to do an inventory, you should know full well who those winners are in your home groups, in your most frequented groups. You stick with those people, and then you get some guidance, and they give you some direction. Step 4 is about being truthful and honest. And one of the talking points I wrote down here were one of them here, I talk about my own experience. Like, I remember just before getting sober, I was lying, blatantly lying to anybody who would listen about my grade 12. I did not have a grade 12 education. I had never graduated high school, but I told anybody who would listen that I had, and I had graduated with honors. And internally, I was thoroughly resentful that I couldn't get a job at Chrysler's. Chrysler Canada was probably the major employer in Windsor and Essex County, and I imagine it still is. My father had worked there, my father-in-law, my uncles, cousins, too many people that I had known had worked there, and it was the dream job of, many a guy trying to start out, a job where you could put in 30, 32 years and retire with a full pension. And I couldn't believe that they wouldn't hire me. Their basic requirement was a grade 12 education. I didn't have one. I had convinced myself that I deserved that job in spite of the fact that I didn't meet their most basic requirement. And I would lie to anybody who would listen that I had one. This is the stuff you find out in personal inventory in step 4. You find out these things about yourself, and it's a brilliant place to be. And much like steps 2 and 3, we only need bring the most basic willingness. A couple other spots that I had highlighted here that I think are worth noting, and I'm going to hit them up right now. Page 49 and 50. I think I've already been over those. Yeah, page 47 in the 12 and 12. In AA, we slowly learned that something had to be done about our vengeful resentments, self-pity, and unwarranted pride. We had to admit we had many of these defects, even though such disclosures were painful and humiliating. We had to drop the word blame from our speech and thought. Continuing on to page 48, we had started to get perspective on ourselves, which is another way of saying we were gaining in humility. I think that's kind of the spirit of step 4. We come into Alcoholics Anonymous with so many preconceived notions about how we got there and why we got there. We're full of resentment, we're full of anger, we're full of the blame game, and anybody who's getting to this spot in your recovery, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to spell that out to you. It's everybody else's fault, and it has been for years. The refusal to admit and own our own part in it is so often kind of the repeated refrain for most of us. At least it was for me. We're bemoaning our position, we're bemoaning our situation, we're looking to all the things that went wrong, and in no way, shape, or form are we willing to take ownership. And step 4 demands that we do that. And I'm so grateful that it happens so early in the 12 steps. There's 8 more to go when you get past this one. And here we really get to start to understand how we're going to practice this day to day, one day at a time, going forward. And it's a beautiful thing because it's such a daunting idea when we get here, and it's terrifying to consider looking into those dark places. That's why we don't do it alone. We do it with friends. We do it with people we can trust. We do it with the winners. But once we take those steps in, and once we bring that willingness out, and the light starts to open up, and we can look in the mirror and we can begin to love what we see, because we realize we're perfectly, beautifully, and wonderfully human. It's an incredible step to take. And that we continue to do it for the remainder of our sobriety is it's freeing, it's power that you can't imagine, it's joy, it's humility, but it's there, and it's for each one of us to step forward and take ownership of ourselves, and I'm grateful for it. I don't know what else I can add, how much more I can add. I really don't want to continue to beat this one up, man. It's not easy, man, and I pray that each of you take this step with confidence, and don't do it alone. Bring some friends. Bring those people that you know are going to have your back and support you. Stick with the winners in this one, guys. I love you. I'm cheering you on. Once again, so many more talking points that I didn't hit, but I think I'm going to leave it at that one and put this one in the books, man. It works if we work it, and this one takes some work, guys. I'm cheering you on. Have a great one. Bye.